Hi, I just thought I would make a video on something that has been legitimately kind of concerning to me, just like as a person living in the United States. That being the reaction to the shooting and killing of Brian Thompson, allegedly by Luigi Mangione. I'm not like a YouTuber, I haven't really made videos like this ever before. It's just something that I have been increasingly concerned by the rhetoric around, coming both from public figures online who people my age often look up to, as well as just my peers, my friends, people who I grew up with, seemingly praising the alleged killing, even calling it heroic and so on. To be fair, I mean, some reacted just with apathy, sort of like a weaker stance of like, who really cares? But there's also like a really concerning number of people who are praising what happened, saying that it was heroic, that perhaps we should even do more things like it. And it's this stance that to me is very, very concerning. I think that a lot of the people who are pushing it believe that they're doing the right thing. I think that they have a really deep care for the people who are being negatively impacted by the current private healthcare system. By the way, as an aside, this video will not be like a defense of the merits of the private healthcare system. Like, I do think that there is a legitimate need to reform our system. I think there's good data suggesting that a lot of people would be saved if we switch to a single payer system. So I'm not here to like cheerlead United Healthcare or any of these healthcare companies. I'm here to call attention to what I think is like a really profound moral failure of people who are praising this. And I think it's coming from a place of ignorance. Like, I don't think it's coming from purposeful malice, though things rarely do. So I wanted to specifically address a YouTube video that I just watched recently by a YouTuber called Philosophy that attempts to make a sort of philosophical and moral defense of what Luigi allegedly did. So to that end, I'm going to react to his video. I'm going to play it on 1.5 times speed as well as cut through it to ensure that I'm respecting fair use. I don't want to make this seem like I'm just ripping off his video. Definitely seems like he put a fair amount of effort into it, so I don't want to just steal the content. But before I do that, I wanted to sort of prime you for some of the things that I'm going to be saying with some initial thoughts. And the first of that is that if you're someone watching this video and you're sympathetic to what Luigi did, you think it was good, it was heroic, I just want you to take one thought seriously. I want you to really think about the implications if you happen to be wrong about this. And I can imagine two different reactions. I expect some of you will react sort of acknowledging it, being like, I am aware, like, this was a grave thing that had to happen, that Luigi had to shoot this guy. There was thousands of lives hanging in the balance due to the private healthcare system. Like, I understand the gravity of this, but I still hold the position that I hold. But then I expect that there's also some other people whose primary reaction to this might be like annoyance. Like, so what if anything? So what if a meteor comes down and hits you on the head? To quote a recent saying. And I think I would caution those people to take more seriously what they're actually talking about. Like, guys, this is real life now. This is not like us LARPing online, tweeting, stupid things at each other. Someone was shot to death. Like, this is important. Even if you think it was justified, it's still very important. Even if you're completely right, you should still take very seriously the prospect of if you're wrong and acknowledge what's at stake here. Because I feel like there are a fair number of people who treat this pretty frivolously, and that to me is somewhat shocking, or really concerning, disappointing, maybe I would say. This is not something to like play around about. The second thing that I wanted to mention was that there's two ways that I would characterize the reactions to what Luigi did that are in favor of what he did, who call it heroic, that I don't think the current pushback against that stance has called enough attention to. That being that it's very undemocratic. And I really want to emphasize that phrasing, undemocratic, because my impression is that a lot of the people who are generally in favor of what Luigi did see themselves as very pro-democratic. They see themselves as being, sticking up for the little guy, sticking up against the rich and powerful in society, wanting what's best for everyone. But I think that they're unwittingly promoting rhetoric that is fundamentally very undemocratic. And the second thing that I would characterize is that it's lazy. And I don't mean this in just like a frivolous sense. Like, I think that there's something like a deep, depraved laziness about turning to killing in this way until you are absolutely certain that every other option is exhausted. And of course, Philosophy in his video does have some things to like naturally push back against this, and that's why I'm going to watch the video and react. Unfortunately, I think he fails pretty harshly at trying to make the defense that he's trying to make, and I think these descriptions ultimately hold true. But yeah, without further ado, I guess it's time to react to the video.
These fucking billionaires, they need to be put down. Like fucking rabid dogs. They're like rabid with fucking greed.
In some dark corners, this killer is being hailed as a hero.
Free Luigi!
Hear me on this. He is no hero.
Free Luigi!
The real hero in this story is the person who called 911 at McDonald's this morning.
There's a guy from Nestle that doesn't think water is a human right. That guy should be hunted down and shot. Right?
This killer is not a hero. He should not.
Okay, so right off the bat, we have Bill Burr saying things like, free Luigi, we should shoot these billionaires like rabid dogs. The guy from Nestle who said that he doesn't think water should be a human right should be shot. So again, I did watch this video already, and in between then and now I did some research on certain relevant points. And I do think it's kind of relevant to bring up that Bill Burr has a $20 million net worth. I don't know the guy personally, so I could be wrong about this, but I went and did a search looking for any kind of like activism or charitable endeavors that he's involved in. And as it happens, I couldn't find any. So if you're going to claim that the system is so bad that people ought to be shot, I expect that you can actually like be bothered to do something about it. And I know that, people love to quote this comic where it's like, oh, we should improve society somewhat. Oh, and yet you participate in society. I'm very intelligent. But we're not talking about just reforming society. We're talking about shooting people to death. Society is so bad that people should be shot. And Bill Burr cannot be bothered to do literally anything to help that situation except sit there and say that other people should go and shoot billionaires because he thinks they deserve it. What a profound laziness. This is what I meant by lazy. He cannot be bothered to get involved in any kind of activism to fix the healthcare system, to fix wealth inequality in this country. He would rather just sit there, make a living off of cracking jokes, do nothing, and just go you know what we should fucking do? We should just go shoot that guy. I just think he deserves to die. Yeah, we should just go shoot them. What a profound laziness. I can't get over how someone can behave this way and think that they're a good person. And I know Bill's a comedian, it's part of his shtick that he's, I guess, kind of a dick. But I can't take you seriously if you're claiming that we're in such a dire situation that people need to be shot to death, and yet you yourself cannot be bothered to do literally anything about it, except say that other people should go out and shoot the people who you deem unworthy of living because they're responsible for these things. I can't, it's like a arrogance that I can't wrap my head around. But anyway, here, let's keep going.
Hail.
I listened to Luigi Mangione 3 times, and honestly, it's beautiful. And I agree with him.
Hello, I'm Chad Marks. In this video, I'm going to give you the ethical defense of the assassination of Brian Thompson. Rest in piss. As a former professor of ethics, I can explain why this murder was not only ethical, but a harbinger of revolution. A beacon of hope amidst the apocalypse and a clarion...
I didn't catch in my first watching that he's a former professor of ethics, and if that's the case, I'm further disappointed, let's say.
Call to action. The old world is dying, and the new struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters.
Okay, pause. This is why I included the bit I did about taking these things seriously and really understanding like what's at stake when you're wrong. And I hate to be like the anti-fun guy. Like I know people weaponize this kind of thing all the time where they're like, you're not allowed to do that, you shouldn't be, doing it that way. But like, guys, we're either talking about a murder of a man in the street or the tragedy of tens of thousands of people dying due to the healthcare system. I mean, like, what in that warrants Super Mario main menu? I'm just saying, like, to me, it's like a kind of like, I guess I would call it consumerist. Like, why? I don't see the through line. Like, I don't see, in this case, how Super Mario evokes what we're talking about here. It's just disheartening to me, like, that we're discussing what are, like, the serious things about society. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just, like, being a hater here, but there's something sad to me about it.
Osama bin Laden believed that the US was the Galactic Empire, the Taliban was the Freedom Fighting Rebellion, and he wanted to strike the evil empire however he could. But since the United States is the only developed nation in the world without universal healthcare. The only developed nation. And a universal healthcare system would save over 68,000 lives per year. Those most responsible for these deaths are the gargantuan health insurance corporations, who maintain the status quo of privatized healthcare by bribing politicians for favorable legislation.
They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else.
Private health insurance is the third biggest lobby in the US.
Okay. So this, to me, is actually the most important point of the whole video, like right here at the onset. Because there's a claim implicit in this that the private health insurance companies, like United Healthcare, basically control our entire political system through lobbying. And now, is lobbying a problem? Yes. I really disagree with the logic behind it. I think the court case was like Citizens United that said that this was like fine to do. I think we should do away with it. But at the same time, we can't pretend like lobbying is what is behind everything in our political system. I mean, take, for example, the Affordable Care Act. It was passed in 2008, despite undoubtedly a huge number of moneyed interests lobbying against it. I mean, what are we to conclude here? By the way, like, I went and looked at the polling data right now, and a majority of Americans are in favor of the government stepping in to guarantee every American health care. But more Americans, from the poll I was reading, were saying that they're in favor of that system resembling the current private healthcare system, maybe with like a Medicaid option, than they are in favor of single payer. So you can explain the current situation of the American healthcare system without needing to appeal to lobbying at all. That's that to me is the fundamental problem on a factual level, since this section is called the facts, with the whole video. You can't blame lobbying for something unless you have significant evidence that were there no lobbying, we would have a single payer system. Right now, the majority of people are not in favor of a single payer system in this country. Now, I know oftentimes very left-leaning people defer to things like, oh, it's due to propaganda, people don't really know what they want. But this is the kind of undemocratic rhetoric that I was referring to. Like, guys, you can't just say everyone else but you is susceptible to propaganda and you alone are the clear, free-thinking beacon of truth in society. The majority of people are not in favor of a single-payer healthcare system. Now, that does not somehow magically mean that the 68,000 people who, according to that study, pass away every year because the private healthcare system is unable to save them. That doesn't somehow make that a good thing. That makes that a failure of our system. If you think that we should just... Let me put it to you this way. Part of having a democracy is that we have to all arrive at agreement on what is the best thing to do as a society. If the majority of people are not in favor of something, it is fundamentally undemocratic to think that we should go and commit violence to have that happen anyway. And there are cases like Nazi Germany, when you can find yourself in a society where the majority of people are in favor of something that's bad. But if that's the case, you have to go and target the people who are actually responsible for that. So in this case, who is responsible for the fact that we have a private healthcare system and not a single payer healthcare system? On what basis can you claim it's Brian Thompson?
They spent $157 million on bribes in 2023 alone, lobbying the government to keep healthcare privatized. United Health is significantly the largest. They have 15% of the market share. So by this metric, they're responsible for 15% of those 68,000 uninsured deaths, or approximately 10,000 dead Americans every year. But let's be charitable and say lobbying is only half responsible for our privatized healthcare. So I'll argue the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, was responsible for 5,000 deaths.
Okay. How is that the charitable take? What evidence is there that if there were no lobbying at all, and I'm not denying that the lobbying happens, we should not have lobbying as we do in our current political system, what evidence is there that if there was zero lobbying in our political system, we would have a single-payer healthcare system right now? Because last I checked, and I looked into some polling data before this, it is true that the majority of Americans are in favor of the government guaranteeing health care to every American, but it's also true that more Americans are in favor of that coming through something like Medicaid than through a single-payer system. So if the majority of Americans are not in favor of a single-payer healthcare system at this current moment, what is the evidence that this is due to lobbying? Like, it seems as though he just assumes this. He goes to a 50% figure as if that's a charitable take, but he doesn't give any logic for that whatsoever. He simply says lobbying exists, therefore this is because of lobbying, and therefore we can actually assign moral culpability for all of these deaths, not just to United Healthcare as an organization, but to Brian Thompson specifically. I mean, I would be interested to hear what his logic is, if there's any evidence of that, because as far as I could look, and I tried to do my due diligence before this and look, I could not find any evidence that if there were no lobbying, then therefore we would have single-payer healthcare. I didn't see it.
Every year. And this is just uninsured deaths. Many others are insured, but are then denied life-saving care. Like Cole Schmidtnecht, who died on January 15th, 2024, after United Health stopped covering his medically necessary asthma inhaler.
22-year-old Cole Schmidtnecht treated his asthma with an Advair inhaler, costing $66 a month. But last year, Walgreens told him the inhaler was no longer covered by his insurance and would cost $539.
And he asphyxiated within 5 days.
Yeah.
So did he.
There can be no doubt that our current state of affairs is ghastly in many ways. Now, in fairness, there is no healthcare system on the planet that does not have some horror story like this. I was reading the case of a boxer who just recently passed away from cancer in the UK, and she was posting about her story online saying that she kept getting passed around between basically emergency doctors, never able to get a diagnosis from a specialist, and the emergency care doctors basically kept telling her there's nothing wrong with her until eventually it became very obvious that there was, and then she passed away from cancer that she probably would have had a better chance fighting against without it. So there are, I mean, I definitely think the, US's system is worse in this regard. But again, like, can you really point to a case like this and just say, therefore, like, this is coming from malice? Like, therefore, people are doing this just for the sake of profit? And more on the profit incentive thing in a moment.
On how many die due to similar circumstances. Why would a corporation share that data? But these deaths are in addition to the 68,000 uninsured deaths every year. So we should be comfortable attributing at least 5,000 deaths onto Brian Thompson's fat, decomposing head. And obviously, these deaths are not the only way our healthcare system fails at...
Also, to be frank, I do not see the logic in jumping straight from, like, these deaths happen to Brian Thompson is culpable for them. Like, if Brian Thompson didn't exist, would these deaths not happen? I mean, that said, I do understand, okay, he's the one profiting from it, and so on.
Providing healthcare. The capitalist ethos of putting profits over people is most obvious in this sector.
I'm at a cancer treatment center
Okay,
getting my 27th dose of
and I
radiation.
agree
My
about
doctor recommends
that. Who has the power to change it? Who has the power to change that? Does Brian Thompson possess any power to change our current healthcare system to be a single-payer system? The answer is no. No, he has no power to do that. We live in a country where politicians who we elect through elections that I happen to believe are free and fair make these decisions. Under the current system that those politicians have in place, this kind of insurance company is actually necessary for people to receive care. Now, you could argue that it's an unnecessary thing in terms of, like, this is not the system that we should be using, and I think that's a great point. But as long as we're in this current system politically, there must be insurance companies. And I think people hold insurance companies so culpable because of their, they act in a very cold way. They act in a very profit-motivated way. But I also don't see why, let me give you an example. Let's say you were to go to a hospital, you had no insurance and no money, and you go to the person in charge of the hospital and you basically plead with them saying, please, I'm going to die unless you treat me. Please, just sneak me in the middle of the night and treat me or something like that. I promise you most hospitals are going to say no, probably. Again, due to the current legal system that we have. And let's say 1,000 people do that a year and the hospital turns them all away when theoretically they could have snuck them in and saved them. Should we go kill the leader of the hospital, whoever's in charge? I forget if the term is president or, so forth. Does that mean we get to go kill that person? Because they are profiting, by the way, off of it. They make a killing. And in the previous lobbying thing, hospitals were 2 steps down from insurance, which didn't even specify health insurance companies. So would that be justified? We get to go kill those people now because they won't do it for free? Or does the blame lie with the political apparatus that we have to change in order to have a better system like single payer going forwards? I would understand the logic if there were a majority of people in the US today that were in favor of single payer, yet the politicians are refusing to pass the legislation to get single payer in. Then you could go and attack a politician who actually has that power to make the decision-making process. Companies have power to sway things through lobbying, but not to the level where they can alter outcomes to this fascist level extent that's being claimed here. I don't see it. again, and you have plenty of counterexamples, like the Affordable Care Act literally put a hard limit on the amount of profit that health insurance companies can make. Like a hard limit. It is illegal for them to make more than this percentage of profit under the Affordable Care Act. There could not be legislation, I guess besides single payer, that they would be more motivated to lobby against than that. And yet, people were inspired by Barack Obama's message of change. They voted for him. They voted for a Democratic coalition to have control of Congress, and the legislation got passed. So, at what point is this lobbying, like, I'm going to say magically taking control of our political system to the level where that is who the blame lies with, is actually the insurance companies, let alone, again, that the hospitals also seem to be involved in lobbying, and yet seem to get a free pass in this because suddenly, in my opinion, it becomes obvious that you're not justified to go shoot the head doctor of a hospital just because they won't treat you for free. I don't know, unless some people would claim that, but I don't expect so.
35. UHC refuses to pay for more than 28. I've fought them for weeks to get full treatment approved.
Health insurers limit coverage of prosthetic limbs, questioning their medical necessity.
Insurers both refuse to cover some prosthetic limbs and repossess others for non-payment. I can't believe this needs to be said, but repossessing limbs from amputees is cartoon supervillain shit. Subjecting healthcare to the capitalist calculus of minimizing costs and maximizing profits makes this violence inevitable. And the most infuriating part...
Okay, so, again, even if you want to claim that it's to the level where violence is justified, there's no reason to kill Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, because he has no power to change this.
As Max Kennerly writes, there's no actual reason for private health insurance to even exist. It doesn't lower costs, it doesn't expand coverage, it doesn't expedite care. It makes those all worse. Its sole function is to extract profit as a middleman between patients and providers. They're just parasites.
This company made $22 billion in profit last year. Not revenue, pure profit. And they got that money by denying people care. United has the highest denial rate of any health insurer. They deny 1 out of every 3 claims with the explicit intention to increase their profits.
Since 2010, health insurers gave $120 billion
And by the way, so I've seen a lot about why United in general is really bad. For example, they were using a really poorly done AI implementation to deny people's insurance claims, and they're being sued for that. I think that there's this sort of very cynical acceptance of just well, nothing can ever be done in our current legal system, and people just take that at face value without even trying. It's, again, profoundly lazy to me. There is a growing public sentiment that we should have single-payer healthcare in this country. The majority of people don't seem to hold that yet. So I don't believe in this kind of well, actually, we should still have it, and it's actually so bad that we can go kill people, actually. It's an authoritarian thing. In a democracy, there will be times when people are stupid, let's say, and the best way of doing things is not how a democracy does it. But if you believe in the morality of democracy, that you need the consent of the governed, then there's not really a way around that. You don't get to just go and be actually, I'm right. I'm so right that I'm going to go kill someone because we don't have a system that the majority of people in my country are not in favor of. I would not call that moral by any means. And by the way, I know people are going to naturally appeal to a situation like Nazi Germany or something like that to say, well, what if you find yourself in Nazi Germany? What should you do? If you are going to go, hopefully meet up with a group of resistance and not just act on your own to go kill someone, you should actually do steps that will lead to that system being thrown out and a more just and equitable system coming in. You should not just go kill people without actually aiming towards replacing that system with a more just system. And so in this case, again, you go out and kill Brian Thompson. It has no effect at all on the actual healthcare system. The next CEO comes in right away, gives a speech about how they're not changing anything. No laws are changed. What has it actually accomplished? Not only that, but when you just kill someone and then go away to prison for life, you aren't even able to advocate for whatever system you think would be beneficial. You aren't able to spend your life actually trying to get a single-payer system in place. You're sent to jail for your life. And I'm not in favor of the death penalty, so I really hope that they do not give it to Luigi. It would both be evil and I think a strategic error in terms of turning him into a martyr. But there's no, like, I don't see the logic. I simply don't.
While denying your claims, and 44% of that $120 billion was United Health. Every single one of those $120 billion came from denying a sick or dying person care they needed, all while killing 68,000 Americans per year.
Universal healthcare coverage could save 68,000 lives a year. And Brian Thompson was personally paid $10 million a year for standing atop that system of death.
So 12 years ago, on the morning of December 4th, 2024, United Healthcare was holding its annual shareholder meeting where they dive into gold coins earned through death and destruction. And as CEO, Brian Thompson was
this is the section called the facts, but yet he's assigning all the moral blame here without really much argument, by the way. Like, again, there was no justification for why the mere existence of lobbying is the sole... okay, not the sole. He reduced it to 50%, but there was no, like, argument given for why that 50% number is a charitable take. It was just taken as facts, just without any kind of... Like, I think that's sorely missing. If he does have an argument in favor of that, I would love to hear it, but I think it's a grave omission from this video.
To the meeting, he was shot and killed by a masked vigilante. Police found 3 bullet casings at the scene, with the words delay, deny, depose, referencing this book. The masked vigilante fled the scene on an e-bike, and police later found his backpack in Central Park stuffed with Monopoly money. The story spread like wildfire across social media.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
The working class hadn't been this excited since that submarine collected all those billionaires for a monster kill. But we're not here to talk facts. Let's talk philosophy.
I mean, again, You've already made several implicit philosophical/ethical takes in the facts section. So...
When Luke Skywalker destroyed the first Death Star in Star Wars A New Hope, he also killed the 1.2 million crew members aboard the space station. Yet Luke is objectively the hero of that story, because the crew were space Nazis.
Yeah. We'll keep the local systems in line.
They were at war, and the Death Star had already killed millions of people. On Jeddah...
Oh, it's beautiful.
Then Scarif... And then 2 billion more when it blew up the planet Alderaan. Luke is heroic, despite the mass murder, because of his motivations. He wanted A, justice for Alderaan, B...
And by the way,
to prevent further...
I mean, I probably have already said enough about why I think it's kind of childish to appeal to things like Star Wars in this case. But I think I, probably owe it to you to articulate also why, besides just like an aesthetic. I think there's an immaturity associated with it, / it's seemingly pretty consumerist to me. That being that, like, things are often lost when you appeal to fiction like this, and you start to, like, these events did not happen. And there are things baked into these fictional accounts that you sometimes lose track of. And let me give an example of that. Like, again, I'm very against the death penalty. I've encountered people in real life who will make points like, well, what if it's like the Joker in Batman? It's someone who's that sick. I mean, you have to kill them then. And what I don't think people realize in every case is that, they're bringing in this thought of, like, the ethical debate in Batman comics and movies about should Batman kill the Joker or not. And in that context, a lot of people say, like, Batman should definitely kill the Joker. He keeps breaking out and he keeps killing people. Like, clearly it would be better if Batman were to kill the Joker in this case. And there might be some issues with that too, but I think the important thing to note is, like, guys, the reason why the Joker breaks out is because it's fiction and they need to keep writing Batman and Joker stories. Like, in real life, you would capture him and put him in jail, and, like, that would be the end of it. So, and I know that there's the post hoc rationalizations about, no, the Joker's actually this super genius and so on, and that's why he gets to get out and stuff like that. But my point is that, like, there's things that are lost in moving from fiction to real life that it's sometimes even hard to keep track of. So, as a general rule, I don't think it's, like, a great practice to do things like this. I think that you can probably find real life cases that make your point, and it's more effective in that case. But anyway.
Genocide, and C, to strike a decisive wartime blow against the most powerful empire in existence. Do you see where this is going? Luke was a freedom fighter who killed for justice and his ideals. Osama bin Laden, like Luke Skywalker, also became a freedom-fighting mass murderer for his ideals. He thought that the US was the empire. This is objectively correct. But since he opted to target civilians, he's definitively disqualified from being a hero. Luke didn't kill civilians by dive bombing his T-65B X-Wing class starfighter into the tallest skyscrapers in the financial district of Coruscant. So while bin Laden correctly assessed the US as a global villain, he still pursued terror over change. Not a hero. The Navy SEALs who killed bin Laden are considered heroes. They killed the guy who was responsible for 3,000 innocent deaths. The Navy SEALs killed for justice. Brian Thompson, responsible for 5,000 deaths every year, wasn't killing for justice. He wasn't killing for his ideals. He wasn't killing because he was a freedom fighter. He killed for money.
Brian Thompson wasn't an upstanding businessman.
I think that it does need to be somewhat pointed out that there is a meaningful ethical difference between failing to save people and actually driving a plane into a tower and killing 3,000 people. Like, I know that I guess this would be like a utilitarian take that would say there's no difference. I mean, okay, this isn't even something that I'm really going to spend much time arguing because I think it's easy to get bogged down in this. But, like, you're using the word killing to mean something other than killing, at least.
He was a mafia boss, standing in between doctors and patients who made his millions by bankrupting people and letting them die. He may never have held a gun directly to someone's temple, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a killer.
Well, how I would say it is to go back to my earlier thing, which is that in our current legal system, you sort of must have insurance companies. I mean, again, someone out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's no single-payer system, nothing legislative changes right now, we actually need health insurance companies to exist for people to afford really expensive things like operations and so on. So how can you say that he is killing these people? You could argue the politicians are, I guess, or that just we collectively are as a society by not voting in a single-payer system. But, I mean, A, he's not inflicting these people with sickness. And B, what it ends up looking like, again, because the profits of these insurance companies are capped, I mean, yes, it is being motivated by things like greed. But you must admit that there's at least a difference between me shooting a random person dead and having to make judgments about who to fulfill the claims of or not in order to keep the whole thing afloat, basically. Yes, it is evil that there's profit at all involved in this, but under this current system, which Brian Thompson has no ability to change, no power to change, this is how it's working currently. So it is evil. There is a large tragic element involved in this, but I don't think you can actually ascribe the same kind of blame to Brian Thompson as you could to Osama bin Laden for, I mean, let me put it to you this way, again, if Brian Thompson did not exist, I don't think anything different would happen about the healthcare system. Whereas I think to make the claim that if bin Laden did not exist, there would be nothing different about 9/11 is at the very least a lot more speculative. That enters the territory of well, I'm sure someone else would have picked up where he left off and so on, or his collaborators would have still done it. That seems to me to be a lot more speculative. But anyway.
Reality in this country is, if you kill people with a gun, it is very obvious to everybody what's going on and you'll rightly deplore it. If it is a more systemic kind of killing, if people are being killed through claim denial letters, through a deliberate practice of saying no to a certain form of care that you know you're going to end up granting, but if you say no, 80% of people will lose steam and not appeal successfully, and you only have to give it to 20% of those people, and you factor that into your balance sheet. And if that is not an incidental thing that happens, that's actually how you make money. You cannot expect to live in a society in which that rage goes nowhere.
And by the way, if we know this so much for certain that this is what companies do, then they should, people should be going after these companies legally. We have means to go after these companies if this is what they're doing. If you're saying that it's a situation where they're ripping people off from their care, which it sounds to me like that is what's happening, they're ripping people off who are paying for their care, and then they're playing coy with, when it comes time to file a claim, that they wrongfully deny claims that they end up granting once appealed. why don't we actually do the work to address that then, instead of just going and killing someone? Like, back to my point about laziness. These are all valid problems about our healthcare system that can be addressed. Like, we don't, like, I think part of it is a cynicism in the system in general, but I don't think that there's good evidence to claim that you can never address these things through our legal system. I don't see it. I think it's just something that people accept on fiat and then don't do anything because they're just going to sit there like Bill Burr, do nothing all day, and just be like, yeah, we should kill that guy. Like, laziness to the point of depravity, in my opinion.
Fizzles out and dissipates.
If you compile all the facts about how United Health operates its business, there's no version of that story where Brian Thompson is not a supervillain. He was killing more Americans than the worst terror attack of all time every year.
But this dude, make no mistake, he was a killer. He was such a good killer that the company was like, damn, Brian. Damn, you cold-blooded. We need to make you CEO. Wow, you don't care. Women, kids, you get them all. Wow, Brian, you got promoted the way a gang member becomes a leader, you know? You're the coldest one out here.
If your business model
So,
requires you to
like,
have
I
thousands
mean,
of
I don't really want to spend much time defending this. But, like, I would just make the claim that an insurance company cannot fill every claim. They cannot. The company would not function. So let's take these things into account. Under the current legislative system, insurance companies must exist for people to be able to afford care. They cannot fulfill every claim, or else they will cease to exist. And the people who have the power to change this system is not Brian Thompson, but actually the Democratic body of America, which at any point could choose to believe in single-payer healthcare, given that that's where the data is leading, and vote it into effect. Vote for politicians who will do it. There are certainly politicians in the Democratic Party who are in favor of a single-payer healthcare system. Vote for them. They will win, and then they will enact a single-payer healthcare system. Right now, the majority of Americans do not want a single-payer healthcare system. Therefore, in a democracy, there must be insurance companies. These insurance companies must deny some claims. Now, are they doing like the good? Like, do I think they're concerned with being moral? That they're denying the least amount of claims possible? No, not at all. I think that you should probably sue the shit out of these companies. And a lot of them probably deserve to go under. The ultimate solution being a shift to single payer. But you can't assign moral blame on the level of Osama bin Laden orchestrating a terrorist plot to literally kill people and assign the same amount of blame to an insurance company that, because of the situation it's in, even if it were acting perfectly altruistically, even if we completely take out the profit motive, would have to deny some claims. I mean, where's the equivalence? And this is all just taken for granted in this video, apparently. People just take these things for granted due to certain preconceptions that they have about the unfairness of our system. I think unfairness in our system is a horrible thing. We should all fight it. But you need to actually have an educated understanding of what it is. Has there been real effort before we go to the level of shooting people in the street to try and get it changed? And if there hasn't, then you have to try that first before you try shooting people down in the street. I mean, the Affordable Care Act, when was that passed? Not even 20 years ago. We're just jumping to the most extremist solutions possible that don't actually solve anything because people are just angry and they're losing the moral fiber and the actual strength of character to want to put in the work needed to change these things.
To make a profit, you are a mass murderer. Which brings us to his killer, Luigi Mangione.
This is going to take so long to get through.
Allegedly. Murdering Brian Thompson was an assassination, just like the SEALs. It was actually a cleaner assassination, honestly, because unlike the SEAL raid, Luigi only killed his single target. He considered using a bomb, but decided the collective to be too great. Designed towards the one terrorist most responsible for thousands and sure, Luigi had personal relations. Most news the media was quick to classify this as an act of terrorism, but Luigi is not a terrorist like bin Laden. Luigi killed the terrorist like bin Laden. Luigi is a counter-terrorist like the Navy SEAL.
So, terrorism by definition is like, right, the targeting of civilians, like the targeting and killing, like killing, not failure to save, like the killing of civilians in order to inspire terror. Like Brian Thompson, by any definition of international law or anything, is a civilian. Like, again, the whole point, this is why I was emphasizing the lobbying point at the beginning, because I suppose it all comes down to this belief that somehow CEOs like Brian Thompson are actually the ones who wield all the power in this country. Never mind that, like, right now, under Trump, I feel like it could not be more obvious that actually the federal government is who holds all the power, and everyone is ultimately at their mercy at the end of the day. Like, there's just this belief that the CEOs control everything through lobbying, and that's why this is analogous. But that's not true. Again, there's no evidence that if there was zero lobbying, that we would have a single-payer healthcare system. To me, I think that's just the end of the argument as far as what philosophy is claiming.
And like Luke Skywalker, Luigi's motivations were justice for the innocent, a symbolic act to prevent more mass murder, and to strike a decisive wartime blow against the most powerful empire in existence. Thus, Luigi is not a terrorist. He's a counter-terrorist. And maybe you're thinking, sure, our healthcare sucks, but violence isn't the answer. Which means we need to talk about the violence. The problem with saying violence isn't the answer is that highly organized violence is already perpetrated against all of us every day. Saying violence isn't the answer is literally just accepting the violence towards us and demonizing self-defense against it. The fact of the matter is, we are losing the class war, and health insurance CEOs profiting billions of dollars by killing Americans.
So the problem here is that when people say violence isn't the answer, they mean violence like physical violence. And what I think philosophy here means by violence is the abstract concept of exploitation. And I think that's like a fundamental miscommunication. Like, there's a reason why people talk about violence as something that you in particular should be hesitant to use, and not just like, you know, like, people hold that to a higher standard than just like, I'm ripping someone off, I'm exploiting them, versus I'm being physically violent towards them. Those are two different levels of action with two different kinds of moral considerations associated with them. And I don't think this kind of like reliance on words kind of argument where you still refer to any kind of exploitation as violence makes sense. And I know that it's relying on the claim that people do pass away from this kind of thing. But it's not the same thing as physical violence towards someone. I mean, like, again, if United Healthcare did not exist, those people who have that sickness would not magically be cured. You're operating under the assumption that we would have a single-payer healthcare system were it not for these companies. And again, not only do I not see the evidence for that, I don't think philosophy has even like put forth any kind of evidence for that in this video. He's just taking it for granted. Lobbying happens. Therefore, if I'm being charitable, it's 50% of why we don't have the single-payer healthcare system. I mean, like, what a thing to just slip in right at the beginning in the section called the facts without any kind of actual justification for it.
Is just one of many fronts. Case in point, after the shooting, health insurance leaders pressured the Department of Justice to charge Luigi. There are thousands of gun-related homicides every year, so why were federal charges brought against Luigi? Well, wouldn't you know it, but the top 3 Department of Justice officials pushing federal charges previously worked for healthcare insurers, including United Health. This is what I mean when I call CEOs state-sponsored terror.
So, this is a fair point, and I could believe that there's an unequal kind of justice being leveraged in Mangione's case. I think that pushing for the death penalty against him is kind of nonsensical, both evil and also like strategically misguided. Like, I think it would turn him into a martyr. So I certainly see the point here. On the other hand, though, like, if you're a member of any profession and someone kills a fellow member of your profession and a bunch of people are like cheering and hollering in favor of it, like, yeah, you would probably not be a fan of that if I were to guess.
The government works for capital, and the capital class has the government push federal charges to punish this son of a bitch as hard as they can.
Okay, well, there's the fundamental claim again. The government serves capital. Like, prove it. you can't just say, like, if you're making a video that's supposed to address a wider audience, like, you have to do a lot more to prove this claim that the government serves capital, especially when there's a ton of counterexamples. Like, right now, as we speak, Trump is, like, cutting the economy with tariffs and so forth. Like, no doubt big business leaders are not a fan of it at all. And yet you still have people just saying on fiat, like, the government serves capital. Of course it does. Like, you don't think that? What, are you uneducated? Like, that certainly needs to be reinforced or justified if you're going to make a video like this.
Working class parole deigned to strike against the untouchable upper class.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand.
Okay, I mean, just please. I don't want to be a hater, but the pop culture appeals, they just strike me as unserious.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line.
So, the corrupt Department of Justice, staffed by previous United Health employees, pushed federal charges, which allowed the death penalty. The message is clear. The DOJ, apparatus of the state, is saying, yes, UHC kills thousands of Americans for profit every year, but if you even think about getting justice, we will execute you. This is asymmetric class.
Okay, so, like, this is illegal, right? I mean, again, I agree that the level of punishment being brought against him seems unwarranted. But, like, killing a guy in the street because you believe that he deserves to die in a manner that's not currently codified into law, like, is illegal. So what do you expect to happen? Like, do you really think they would be okay with that? Like, do you really think they would be like, well, you know, he kind of makes a fair point that, like, Brian Thompson is actually responsible for the deaths of 5,000 people a year. Yeah, we're going to let him go. I mean, you would expect a rational system to still arrest Luigi for this. And again, like, the reason why we don't have the single payer system that you're promoting, you can claim it's because of lobbying, but I see polling data that suggests people just don't believe in it. Incorrectly, mind you, but, like, democratically, people are not as in favor of it as you want them to be or I want them to be right now.
Warfare. The violence against us is unrelenting. As 2024 socialist presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz writes,
violence is not limited to the use of weapons. Violence is denying people health care. Violence is poverty in a country where there is abundance. Violence is making profit from the most basic human needs. Violence is becoming a millionaire through looting and expecting no consequences.
Violence, poverty in a country where there is abundance, I would imagine, is because there's literally, like, people with guns enforcing a regime or something like that, which is just violence.
The class war has been waged so successfully that our quality of life, our spending power, and our social safety nets all decline year after year. The government is not just complicit in this violence, it actively wages war by unequivocally serving the interests of capital instead of the people.
Good, honest, hardworking people continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all, at all, at all.
Nowhere is this more obvious than healthcare. Remember, the U.S.
And by the way, I mean, I fully buy that most politicians in the U.S. probably don't care about the common person. But then it's like, do they care only about money? Like, again, right now, I don't know how you can claim this with the same kind of confidence when we're in a right-wing kind of, like, authoritarian surge that is, like, expressly anti-free trade. Anyway, again, like, I don't know how you can say with the same level of confidence that the government just always serves capital, that's just a given, when we're in the middle of a right-wing, like, authoritarian surge that is expressly prioritizing far-right ideological commitments over capital. Like, the tariffs will lose big businesses money. Like, the economy will bleed from this, according to everything I've read. I mean, unless you don't believe that. But, like, I don't see how this serves the interests of capital, and yet it's happening. So, it seems just like a fundamental assumption that isn't being backed up right now. I don't know.
the only developed country in the world without universal care. If either Democrats or Republicans weren't beholden to capital, one of them would offer us universal health care and wipe the other off the electoral map. The health insurance CEOs, which are capital...
Okay, so again, it's like this claim that everyone in America wants universal health care. Everyone seems to want the government to guarantee health care, but, well, if I remember, what was it, like 70% of people say they're in favor of that? That said, like, single payer does not poll that well to say that it would be like a sweep, a landslide. I mean, there's people today who still talk like the Affordable Care Act was a bad thing. People as in like common people, not politicians. So I don't know where this is coming from.
Personified are responsible for tens of thousands of deaths every year. And financially moving the lines of terrorism. But the press, Ryan Thompson is a hero. Ryan Thompson is a hero. And the man who got to stand up there and abject morality and terrorists. These are the various crystal clear. Ryan Thompson is a
a drug that costs almost nothing to manufacture.
1.3 million Americans are forced to ration their insulin. Why would our government let thousands of people die due to corporate greed? Because this is a government that protects capital, not people. There are 27 empty houses for each homeless person in the US. Why would our government allow capital owners to hoard housing?
So, the insulin thing I think is a really fair point. I'm not overly familiar with the specifics of it, but it does seem pretty egregious to me. Meanwhile, this property thing, like he just pulled a stat, 28 homes. From what I saw, that stat is like what home is like vacant at any given time. So like that would include things like seasonal homes and so on. Like it's just not the case that like, and also by the way, a lot of these homes, from what I understand, are like out in like towns, like summer towns basically, that are not places where homeless people congregate. So I know that it's like a common thing that people in like New York City, for example, leave apartments empty for most of the year and things like that. And we should do things to address this. But these like are somewhat complicated issues, and like once anyone from I've seen dives into the specifics of it, it turns out that it's not as simple as just like evil people hoarding money. Like certainly there are people acting to hoard money. That is like an element, but I don't think that like it's this simplistic case of just like there are people hoarding money. That is all you need to know about this. That's like the only thing you need to know. There's no difficulty. It would be super easy. It's just evil people hoarding money. That's the only reason. I think that's a kind of intellectual laziness from what I understand.
When every major US city has an ever-worsening homelessness problem because our government serves capital, not people. And then this same government has the gall to preach... Fuck, man, I'm so tired. This same government has the gall to preach the importance of nonviolence. In 2024 alone, our government had an $800 billion...
No, I don't think the government preaches the importance of nonviolence. I think people do. Like people who believe in nonviolence, fundamentally. So to be honest, I'm going to cut it there because I think the rest kind of just follows from his earlier presumptions. I will respond to the rest if for some reason it seems like this is, malicious on my part or something, or if there's something really important in the rest of the video that I didn't address. I have watched it, so it doesn't strike me as so. It kind of just seems like everything follows from these things that I've said already. So how would I end off? I would caution against arrogance. I think that people today are often so convinced that they're right, and yet are not willing to put in the work to actually convince other people of that. Their viewpoint is just like, I'm right, I know I'm right. What I want isn't what's happening. Must be something like evil, I have to go kill someone actually to solve this. Like, that's arrogance that verges on evil to me. I think that you have to put in the work to convince people of why you're right. I mean, the thing that I've been returning to over and over again is that I just don't see this picture where like a single payer healthcare system is what the vast majority of Americans are clamoring for, and yet we're like unable to get it because of the politicians. And again, like inevitably, the Mott and Bailey tactic is that then it turns out most people are like propagandized or something like that. That's why they don't believe this. And if they weren't propagandized, if they were only re-educated, then they would see the truth. I would also classify that as like a narcissistic arrogance about your own correctness. Like, I don't see how you can assume everyone else is an idiot except for you and the people who agree with you. There's no like reasonable people who hold the other view. And that's just the end of it. So therefore you're justified in doing literally anything you want to that end. I guess that would be how I would end it. I mean, I don't want this rhetoric to continue escalating because I fear what it will lead to. I fear that people have accepted that our society domestically is sort of like unsalvageable, which I don't think that's the case. Certainly our foreign policy is horrific beyond compare, but like to say that our society right now is so bad that it has to be completely rooted out and replaced, if that is what you believe, then you have a moral duty to go out and do that every day, like the Andor video that he includes in the end of the video. You have to wake up early and fight against this, not sit on your butt and do nothing, let someone else kill someone in a way that's not actually productive to making any kind of real change. That's the be-all end-all of this. I mean, I didn't even necessarily hear an argument from philosophy that Luigi doing this killing is like productive in ending the system. It kind of just sounded like a killing for the sake of revenge because he killed a bunch of people, so he deserves to be killed. Like Bin Laden posed a threat to the continuing lives of civilians that I have no doubt he would kill again and so on. And yet I don't think that in the case of Brian Thompson, killing him actually will save any of those lives that are being killed by the private healthcare system. Because again, the next CEO came in and said, business as usual, folks. We have to do this through like political action. We have to actually convince people of the merits of single payer, that people are dying in the interim, and we have to put in the work to get it changed and not just rely on this depraved laziness of just saying I get to kill who I deem unworthy to live because I'm right. Food for thought. The last question I would end on for anyone who still supports Luigi and what he did would be to ask, like, do you think a reasonable person can disagree with you? Do you think it's just that they're being tricked by the state, tricked by state propaganda? Or do you really think that no one reasonable can hold the opposing view and think that this was not justified and perhaps evil? If you've made it this far, I appreciate you listening. I don't know if I'll do another one of these. Probably not, I guess. But yeah, I would say my politics are anti-killing non-combatants, anti-killing civilians, you know? And everyone, oh, it's so easy to say that for a good reason, man. You know, for good reason. Anyway, have a good one, guys. Bye.